Imagine you're shopping for a toy car, and you pick up one that was made overseas. It might look just like the others, but there's something hidden in its price tag that you might not notice right away. When that toy car arrives in the US, the government adds a tariff, a special kind of tax on top of its original price. This extra cost is meant to make imported goods more expensive than those made at home. The idea is to encourage shoppers to choose American-made products instead, since foreign goods now cost more. In theory, this helps local businesses and workers by giving them a competitive edge. Tariffs aren't new. For centuries, governments around the world have used them to protect local industries, raise money for public projects, and sometimes even to influence international relationships. In recent years, tariffs have been making headlines in the US, especially after the Trump administration raised them on products like steel, aluminum, and car parts. These moves were part of a larger effort to reshape global trade. The main goal, according to supporters, was to bring manufacturing jobs back to America, boost local industries, and reduce the country's reliance on foreign suppliers for essential goods. But not everyone agrees on whether tariffs are helpful. Economists, business leaders, and politicians often debate whether these taxes actually protect jobs or if they end up hurting the economy in the long run. Here's why. When US companies have to pay more for imported materials, they usually pass those extra costs on to shoppers. That means you might notice higher prices, not just on imported goods, but on things made in America too. And it doesn't stop there. Other countries often respond by putting their own tariffs on American products, making it harder for US companies to sell their goods overseas. This back and forth can quickly escalate into what's known as a trade war, affecting businesses and consumers on both sides. One industry that feels the impact of tariffs more than most is the car industry. Building a car is a complicated process that relies on parts from all over the globe. Think of it like assembling a giant puzzle where each piece comes from a different country. Engines, electronics, and even the smallest screws might be sourced from places as far away as China, Mexico, or Canada. So even if a car is built in Michigan or Ohio, it still depends on components from around the world. Tariffs on these parts can disrupt the entire supply chain, making it harder and more expensive to build cars in the US. As a result, automakers are forced to rethink how they design and assemble vehicles. They might look for new suppliers, change their manufacturing processes, or even raise prices to cover the higher costs. All of this creates a complex and costly challenge for the entire industry, from factory workers to executives, and even to the people who sell and service cars. For consumers, it often means one thing: higher prices at the dealership and fewer choices on the lot. Tariffs may sound like a distant policy debate, but their effects can show up right in your driveway. Ford Motor Company now faces a massive financial hit from these tariffs. In 2025, Ford expects to pay an extra $2 billion just in import taxes. That's not for materials, just the added tax bill, which cuts into profits and limits investment in new technology. In one recent quarter alone, Ford paid $800 million in duties, mostly on parts from Mexico and Canada. The pain comes from a Trump administration order that doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum to 50%. While meant to help US steelmakers, it's a huge burden for automakers like Ford. Investors are worried too. Ford's stock dropped after the announcement, reflecting fears about the company's future. Ford isn't alone. Tariffs are squeezing the entire auto industry. General Motors expects over $1 billion in tariff-related costs this year. Volkswagen, with a major plant in Tennessee, anticipates a $1.5 billion impact. The problem: modern cars are built from parts sourced globally, so tariffs hit at every step. Even made-in-America cars rely on engines from Mexico or electronics from Asia. Automakers can't easily swap to domestic suppliers. Changing a global supply chain is slow and expensive. For now, companies are forced to absorb the costs, which pressures profits and raises prices for consumers. The entire industry is caught in a costly web. The financial shockwaves have sparked strong and immediate reactions from both business and political leaders across North America. As news of the tariffs spread, boardrooms and government offices alike have been thrown into a state of high alert, with decision-makers scrambling to assess the impact and chart a path forward. Ford CEO Jim Farley says the company is in constant talks with the White House, hoping for tariff relief on critical parts. The auto industry, already under pressure from supply chain disruptions and shifting consumer demand, now faces even greater uncertainty. Farley warns that without swift action, production lines could slow, threatening jobs and the broader economy. Meanwhile, Canada is considering retaliation after the US doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum. Lawmakers in Ottawa are weighing their options, determined to protect Canadian industries and workers from what they see as unfair trade practices. Ontario Premier Doug Ford urges Canada to double its own tariffs and even suggests taxing electricity exports to the US. Ford's tough stance reflects growing frustration among Canadian leaders, who argue that strong measures are needed to send a clear message to Washington. If these proposals move forward, the consequences could ripple across the continent, affecting millions of Americans and Canadians alike. The flow of goods, jobs, and even energy could be disrupted, escalating the trade dispute to new heights. Premier Ford accuses the U.S. of breaking a verbal agreement, while Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney prefers negotiation over escalation. Carney emphasizes the importance of dialogue, warning that tit-for-tat measures could spiral out of control and damage both economies. The standoff shows how quickly trade disputes can spill into other sectors, creating broader instability. From auto parts to raw materials, North America's tightly woven supply chains are at risk, and even a short disruption could have long-lasting effects. Leaders now face a tough choice: retaliate and risk a full-blown trade war, or seek a diplomatic solution that could restore stability. The pressure is mounting as both sides weigh the costs and benefits of their next moves. The outcome of these high-stakes negotiations will shape the future of North American manufacturing, determining whether factories thrive or falter in the months ahead. For now, uncertainty reigns as both sides weigh their next moves. Boardrooms, factory floors, and government offices are all holding their breath, waiting to see what comes next. The stakes are high for workers, companies, and consumers on both sides of the border. Every decision made in the coming days will have real consequences for families, businesses, and the future of cross-border trade. With a $2 billion tariff bill looming, Ford is scrambling for solutions. The first step: negotiate with the White House for exemptions or reductions, especially for parts from Mexico and Canada. Beyond talks, Ford is re-examining its entire supply chain, searching for domestic alternatives, a slow, expensive process. Shifting manufacturing locations is another option, but building new factories or moving operations takes years and billions of dollars. In the short term, Ford may have to absorb the costs, cut spending elsewhere, or pass higher prices to consumers. Every dollar spent on tariffs is a dollar not invested in innovation or jobs. The company faces tough choices to stay competitive. The search for a sustainable solution is urgent. The impact of tariffs doesn't stop at corporate headquarters. It ripples out to workers and car buyers, touching nearly every part of the auto industry. These changes aren't just numbers on a balance sheet, they affect real people's lives and livelihoods. For auto workers, higher costs could mean fewer jobs, less overtime, or even layoffs. The uncertainty can be stressful, as families worry about their future and communities brace for possible economic downturns. If building cars in the US becomes too expensive, automakers might invest elsewhere, moving production to countries with lower costs. This could lead to factory closures at home, undermining the very goal of protecting American jobs and weakening local economies. The health of the auto industry is tied to the security of hundreds of thousands of workers, from assembly line staff to suppliers and support services. When the industry struggles, entire communities can feel the effects. For consumers, the result is higher car prices. Buying a new car may become out of reach for many families, forcing them to hold on to older vehicles longer or look for used options. Automakers can't absorb billions in new costs without raising sticker prices. These increases get passed on to buyers, making the dream of owning a new car more difficult for many Americans. The paradox is clear: tariffs meant to boost American manufacturing are making American-assembled cars more expensive, which could actually hurt the industry they're meant to protect. Fewer people may buy new cars, slowing sales and threatening jobs across the supply chain, from factory workers to dealership employees. The cycle is complex. Intended solutions are creating new problems, and the effects can be difficult to predict or control. Everyone in the industry feels the squeeze, from the factory floor to the showroom, as the entire ecosystem adapts to a rapidly changing landscape. The future for Ford and the U.S. auto industry is uncertain. If high tariffs persist, companies may be forced to overhaul global supply chains or move production abroad. Negotiations with the White House are critical, Tariff relief could stabilize finances and spur innovation. If talks fail, the $2 billion annual cost becomes the new normal. Consumers will likely see higher prices, which could slow car sales and threaten jobs. Ford's struggle highlights the unintended consequences of broad tariffs. The goal of strengthening U.S. manufacturing is noble, but the reality is complicated. The industry's fate now depends on political decisions, corporate strategy, and the unpredictable world of global trade. For now, everyone, workers, companies, and buyers, waits to see what happens next.